everyone. Welcome to A Taste of Asia. I'm Vinay Nguyen, and today's show is all about stir frying. And stir frying is a Chinese cooking technique that's traditionally done in a Chinese wok over very high heat. And just as the name implies, you want to constantly stir as you're frying. However, it's not deep frying in oil, so it's actually minimal oil, so it's very healthy for you. And you don't need a fancy or expensive wok to stir fry. Today I'm using, it's a wok-shaped pan that you can see has somewhat of a wide base and somewhat shallow sides, because you want to be able to constantly stir the food as it's cooking. So you wouldn't necessarily want to use, for example, a soup pot, because it will be more difficult to stir. So Chinese cooking is a very quick and fast cooking method, and so it's relatively healthy. Other than that, you're using very little oil. The vegetables, for example, keep its texture and the nutrients are preserved, so it is overall a healthy way of cooking. And so today I'm going to show you how to make a really simple chicken and vegetable stir fry, and it comes together very quickly, so it's perfect for any weeknight dinner. And years ago, when I used to work in a Chinese restaurant, not as a cook but as a waitress, I was able to watch how all the food was prepared. And it was done over very high heat in a wok, of course. And the reason why Chinese food is so quick is that high heat. And unfortunately, most of us, including myself, we don't have the luxury of having such a high heat source at home. But we can definitely still replicate the general technique, because stir frying is more of a cooking technique versus an actual dish. So I have here some chicken that I've already cut up into small pieces. With stir frying, you want everything relatively small because, again, we're cooking very quickly. So bite-sized pieces. And I have it just simply marinating in a little bit of soy sauce, just a little bit of sesame oil and white pepper. And soy sauce is used mainly in Chinese cooking, but also Japanese cooking, Korean cooking, as how we season our food with salt. Chinese cuisine uses soy sauce. And also to compare, other Asian cuisines like Thai or Vietnamese cooking will use what's called fish sauce. So if you are cooking any Asian food at home, just keep that in mind, that a lot of the products that you may be using in a recipe already has salt. So especially if you have to watch your salt intake. I always use low sodium soy sauce, only because you know, regular has so much salt, and even the low sodium I find is still a little salty. So you just have to keep that in mind. So I have my chicken marinating, and then the vegetables that I'm using, you can really make stir fry out of anything. I have a mix of carrots. I love to put carrots in stir fry because it has a nice crunch. All the vegetables are going to remain pretty crisp. That's the thing about stir frying. It's done so quickly that you don't really want to overcook any of the vegetables. So everything will remain crisp. And for the carrots, I usually just cut on a slight diagonal. And then from there, I will make smaller matchstick pieces. And usually I cut most vegetables for stir fries on the diagonal, just because I think it looks a little more prettier. You, of course, could just cut simply across. That's fine. But remember, as they say, we eat with our eyes. So we want everything to look, you know, appealing and pretty in a sense. So I have my carrots. And of course, broccoli I'll be using in the stir fry. I find that a lot of times kids and even some adults will say that they don't like broccoli, but in a stir fry, it's really delicious. And because we're cooking it quickly, again, we're saving the texture and the nutrients. So it's really quite a healthy way of cooking. So I have my broccoli florets, and also in Asian culture in general, we try not to waste anything. We try to use as much as we can. And I always find that people throw away the stems of the broccoli, but they're actually really delicious in stir fries. And all you have to do is you could just take your peeler and just peel the outside of the broccoli stem, or you could use your knife. And you simply just trim around like that. So you're left with a really tender stalk. The outside is too tough to eat, but once you peel away the outside, you have this really nice tender broccoli stalk that, again, you just cut into thin strips. And this is actually really good in salads too. So instead of throwing it out, you simply just add it to your stir fry. So other than the high heat, you want to have all your ingredients cut fairly into the same size so that it all cooks quickly and evenly. So you can see that I have also celery. And I also like to save the celery leaves because I think that adds a lot of flavor. And celery, I think, is really an underutilized vegetable for cooking, because most of us use celery for salads or we eat it with peanut butter, but it's actually really delicious in stir fries. And if the outside is a little too stringy, you can just peel it like this. If you use the celery hearts, of course, that's a lot more tender, but sometimes the outside can be too stringy and fibrous, so you just peel away the outer layer of the celery. And again, I like to do my famous diagonal cut. And celery adds a really nice crunch to your stir fry. And we got that. Now, I always like to add a little bit of color to my stir fries because, as I mentioned, we eat with our eyes. So I like to use a sweet red bell pepper. It adds a little sweetness, of course, but also a nice punch of color. And of course, I'm going to be using snow peas. And snow peas are very common in Chinese cooking. You'll see a lot of dishes that have snow peas. What you do have to do first is there's a little string. You just pull off the side, and it's edible, but it's a little chewy, so you have to go just pinch off the top, and then the string comes right off like that. So it takes a little bit of time. A lot of times you'll see in the store, if you buy prepackaged snow peas, a lot of times they're labeled stringless, but I find all the time they have strings. So you just have to take a few seconds to just take the string right off. And then any vegetables you have on hand, stir fry is a great way to use any leftover ingredients. So I'm starting from fresh today, but you can certainly make stir fry out of, for example, if you had some leftover chicken or a couple pork chops from the night before, any vegetables you have, you can pretty much stir fry almost anything. That's probably my one claim to fame, is that I can make stir fry out of anything. What we're doing today is just a basic recipe. You can expand on this. You can use any protein you like. Instead of chicken, you could use pork, you could use beef, you could even use shrimp. If you're a vegetarian, tofu works really well in a stir fry. As long as you have, as I mentioned, a high heat, you can use a frying pan, a large skillet, anything that will be easily that you can easily continuously stir. So we have the three main components of any Chinese meal. It's really the backbone of Chinese cooking. It's garlic, ginger, and scallions. And garlic, of course, we all know it's used in so many other types of cooking, Italian, of course. But aside from garlic, if you ever want to cook Asian food, you have to use ginger. Ginger is the one ingredient that's used in all Asian cuisines, from Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai. Ginger is always used fresh. It's readily available. If you have the ground or powdered ginger, save that for baking, because that's more used in sweets, with the exception of Indian cooking, because they do use a lot of ground spices. But fresh ginger you can buy now at any store, and it usually comes in a big hand like this. You just break off a little piece that you need, like that. And then you can simply use your peeler. Some people use the back of a spoon. You can just peel away the tough skin like that. Of course, you could also use a paring knife. And then I like to cut the ginger across into thin slices. And you wouldn't want to cut lengthwise because then you get a lot of fibers and it's kind of tough. But if you do nice thin slices across and then just stack them up, simply just cut through like that into thin julienne pieces. If you really like ginger like I do, of course you could leave it in this size, but most recipes you'll see is minced ginger. So you just run your knife across like that. And the third component of this trio are scallions. And scallions are sometimes called green onions or spring onions, and it's obviously part of the onion family. The lower portion where the root is more of a strong onion flavor. So this is what we would use for the first part of stir frying. And you can use almost everything except the root. So the bottom portion is used more like the onion flavor, and then the top portion, the green stalks, considered almost like a fresh herb, like you would use basil or parsley, for example. It's used towards the end of a dish because it really doesn't need much cooking time. And it's really just to add a little bit of freshness, almost like a garnish. So we'll reserve the top green portions for finishing our stir fry. So with garlic, ginger, and scallions, you'll see that combination throughout Chinese cooking. As I mentioned, it's really the foundation of so many Chinese dishes. And without ginger, you really can't cook Asian food. So if you try any Asian recipes at home, definitely use this combination of the garlic, ginger, and the scallions. So what I'm going to do now is heat up my pan. As I mentioned, stir frying is high heat and minimal oil. I'm using a very simple neutral canola or vegetable oil. You wouldn't want to use, for example, olive oil because that may be too strong of a flavor, especially if you're cooking Asian. You want to go with more of a neutral oil. You could also use peanut oil. And again, you want to start off at very high heat. I'm going to swirl the pan to get all that oil up the sides. And the most important part really of stir frying, you see I have everything on a cookie sheet, or you can use a platter or a large plate, is you want everything pre-cut and ready to go, because you don't want to have to stop to measure anything or to dice anything. And that's probably the most important tip of stir frying, is being prepared. That's why it's so quick at the Chinese restaurant, is they have everything prepped ahead of time. And on the most part, the cooking time takes, just minutes, and the prep takes usually a lot longer. And if you're ever, need a little more convenience, you can always buy your vegetables pre-cut. A lot of times now stores will sell pre-cut peppers or onions to make it easier for you. And so I'm just cooking the chicken. It's simply seasoned, as I mentioned, in a little soy sauce, a tiny bit of sesame oil. Sesame oil you don't want to use in large quantities. It's more of just for flavoring. And I will put a tiny bit of sesame oil in right at the end just to give an extra little flavor, but it's never used in large quantities. A little goes a long way. So once my chicken starts, as you can see, starting to turn color, you can add a little bit of our classic trinity of garlic, ginger, and the bottoms of the scallions. And as I mentioned, stir frying, you're constantly stirring so that everything cooks evenly. And I just want to mention, once we add all our vegetables, I'm going to add a simple sauce. You'll notice with a lot of Chinese dishes, there's a sauce that finishes the dish. It's usually, of course, has soy sauce. I'm also going to use a little bit of hoisin sauce. And hoisin sauce is sometimes called Chinese barbecue sauce. It has garlic and ginger, of course, some spices, a little sugar for sweetness. And if you've ever had a mushu dish with the pancakes, they usually give you a dark brown sauce that comes with it, and that's hoisin sauce. And that adds a nice extra layer of flavor to the stir fry. So our chicken is starting to turn color, which you can tell is starting to cook. So you can start to really smell the garlic and the ginger. And then I'm going to add my carrots next. And remember, everything's going to cook in a very short time. I sometimes like to use 2 utensils because it allows you to really continuously move the food. And then after the carrots, again, you're going to go in order of how long things take to cook. So the broccoli I would put in next, just the florets. And you can tell with any vegetable, once it starts to lose its nice vibrant color, you're starting to enter that stage of overcooking, which you don't want to do. Especially with stir frying, you want all the vegetables to stay crisp and really nice and vibrant in color. So you can see the broccoli has that really pretty green. Okay, then I'm going to add my red peppers. And as I mentioned, that really adds a nice little punch of color. So always on high heat. And then I'll add my celery along with the celery leaves too. We don't like to waste anything. And the great thing about stir fry, other than that you're able to get dinner on the table very quickly, is that you can start off with just really a few ingredients, and as you build your stir fry dish, you can really feed a large family. It's kind of an Asian philosophy of making do with just a little bit, and you can stretch it out. And then, let's see, I have my delicious broccoli stems. It's funny, sometimes I see people in the store when they go to pick broccoli, they snap off the stem because they don't want to buy it. And I always laugh because that's, I think, one of the best parts of the broccoli. So if you try a stir fry at home, definitely give the stems a try. They're really delicious. Okay, and then lastly, as I mentioned, the snow peas, they take very little time to cook. Less than a minute. And then I'm going to add my sauce, which I had mentioned has the soy sauce, the hoisin sauce. And if you like it spicy, you can definitely add a little heat with some sriracha or some sambal if you like it spicy. We're just going to add our stir fry sauce. It also has a splash of rice vinegar, which is used a lot in Chinese stir fries, just for a little sourness and a little bitterness. And I'm just stirring this. It has a little bit of cornstarch mixed in. And Chinese cooking, a lot of times will use cornstarch to thicken. You just have to remember to give it a stir because as it sits, the cornstarch settles. But you'll notice a lot of Chinese dishes have kind of a glossy sheen to them, and that's from the cornstarch. And I just added a little bit to see how much we'll need, but you can already tell how pretty this looks. All the colors, everything is still crisp. And I think I'm going to add just a little bit more sauce. Again, soy sauce, hoisin, rice vinegar, and cornstarch. If you really like it saucy, of course you can make it more sauce, which is great for eating with rice. But this looks just about done, and it smells so good in here. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to add my scallion greens, the top portion of the scallion. As I said, it doesn't need much cooking. It's really more to add kind of a freshness to the dish and also a little garnish. Okay. And you see how fast that came together. The really important thing is having all your ingredients next to you, and that way you don't have to stop. You can just continuously stir and finish the dish, and that was just a few minutes. And then customarily we would serve this with, of course, rice. In Chinese cooking and Asian cooking in general, rice is really the center of every meal. Whether it's for lunch or dinner, even breakfast, we eat rice. And so we're going to just plate this with a little bit of jasmine rice. Like this. You can use any white rice you like, or even brown rice. I love jasmine rice because I think it has a little more flavor. It smells really nice too. And then we just serve our stir fry right next to it. It's so pretty. You can also add, if you wanted to, some chopped up peanuts or cashews are really nice. And you have a delicious stir fry meal ready in just minutes. And there you have it. I also garnish with a little more scallions. And if you like it spicy, as I mentioned, you can always add a little sriracha, a little sambal. And of course, I have to taste this because quality control is very important. So delicious. The hoisin sauce really gives a nice extra layer of flavor, a little sweet, a little salty. And the vegetables are really crisp too. As I mentioned, all the vegetables should be really crisp, and you can see the color is really pretty. So you can tell that the vegetables aren't overcooked. So stir frying is really simple. Remember, high heat, and also have all your ingredients ready to go, already chopped and diced and measured. And you can have a delicious stir fry ready in minutes for any night of the week. So that's it for today. I hope you join me again for another Taste of Asia. I'm Vinay Nguyen, and see you again soon.